Hello and welcome back to the Tabletop Team Podcast. I am your host, as always, Joe, and with me this week again are my amazing co-hosts. Please introduce yourselves.
This is Michael, and despite my best efforts, I'm still stuck in Ohio, so can I get a rescue party sent my way?
I'm on my way. Oh no, I'm stuck here with you, man. Here we are in Ohio. This is me, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, so this week on the Tabletop Team Podcast, we are talking about... What are we talking about again? Roles. Not rolling like dice. We did that one already. We're talking about assigned jobs, essentially, in a game scenario. Did anybody want to kick us off, or...
So my thing is, basically, how do you guys determine what role you feel like you are best suited to play when joining a group and just kind of having no idea what anyone else is playing? Because I understand that, not all games need a specific role, but, there are some times when having a support-based class or a frontline fighter-based class, those can really just come into handy. And so I'm wondering, how do you go about deciding which niche are you going to fill?
Oh man, as far as D&C style roles, I usually just randomize it and I pick something that I think will be really fun. Mostly because I'm not used to any specific character, so I feel like me just having fun right now is probably the way I should go.
So most games I've played that have roles in it aren't really, I would say, not really assigned roles. So the games I'm thinking of are like Werewolf or Town of Salem. I'm not sure if you guys have played those games before.
No, what do you do in those ones?
So what you do is you have a series of cards and you deal them out to everybody, and then you leave. Werewolf, you have a couple cards still around, and Town of Salem, it's similar to Mafia. I don't know if you've played that.
Is it where you have to figure out who the werewolf is?
Yes.
Oh,
So
nice.
in the case of Werewolf, they actually have like an app which it instructs you. It says like werewolves wake up, identify each other, and then you go back to you close your eyes, and then the other group wakes up, and like they swap cards and stuff around, and you have to figure out who's who based on. You have like a 5-minute time limit. And then Town of Salem is a little bit more in depth. I think, again, I've never played Mafia, but I believe it's very similar to it. So you hand out cards, and then one person is kind of like the storyteller. It's usually Joe, because why is it not Joe? And you go, okay, so like Mafia wake up and you choose like who to kill, and then there's like a doctor who has to pick to save someone, and then there's like a mayor who gets like more votes, and I believe the Don Father you can have is, they're a mafia member, but if the sheriff who can see if they're good or evil points to them, they're like, oh, they're actually good.
How many people you need to play this game?
So Werewolf, I believe you can play with like 4 people. Like, you don't need many, especially with the app. Town of Salem, I think it's like 5 or 6 minimum. It's not an easy game to play. There's a crap ton of roles in Town of Salem, and so like the more you have, the more interesting it gets. But once you have like 5, maybe 6 people, you can play at least the minimum. But then you can't really experiment with the other roles. Like, I believe there's like a werewolf, and it's like on the third, every like 3 nights they get to wake up and just kill somebody. But it's like if you only have like 6 people, it's gonna get rid of people real quick.
Right. I feel like we talked about this on the podcast before, but the game Resistance, it only has 2 roles. It's like the detectives and then the imposters or whatever. And having multiple roles where you can actually have people do other things instead of just, so like in Resistance you only have like the imposters where they can kill someone. Like, you have to do these missions, and the imposters you want to have not on your team, and that they can sabotage the mission every single time. Where with those werewolf games or was it Witches of Salem?
Town of Salem.
Oh, Town of Salem. Those, it sounds like they have like different roles, like a mayor and stuff. I would love to play in a game. I feel like you need so many people, because I think Resistance is 5-player minimum.
So Town of Salem, like I said, needs a lot of people. Werewolf, you don't need as many. It's just one of those things where the more people you have, the more roles you can use that make things interesting. So like Werewolf, it was like there's trying to remember, there's the werewolves, obviously, there's just regular townsfolks, there's like the fortune seer who can like look at one person's card, there's another person who can like, I think the drunk who's like, because you put 3 extra rolls in the middle of the table, they like randomly take a card and swap their card with it, so they don't know what they are anymore.
Oh wow. So this is like for real. There's a bunch of roles in this specific game. When we were talking about roles in games, I was thinking about like how in Monopoly there is the banker's role, and that's like the only role in the game other than just normal players. I don't feel like in some of those games that they actually have multiple roles.
It depends on who you're playing with in Monopoly, because sometimes, depending on the piece they get, dictates how they act. Like, some people get the top hat and think they're better than everybody else.
It's fancy.
I think that's just a problem exclusive to people who wear top hats. They just, if you have a top hat, you automatically think you're better than everyone.
Honestly, if you have a top hat, you might be better than other people. I don't own one.
It's entirely possible. Although most, well, we'll say vanilla board games don't really have roles. It's usually one person who's kind of on track, on top of everything. Once you start branching out into the older games, that's when you start getting roles. Pandemic comes to mind. You've got medic who kind of treats diseases and all these things that can synergize and make the game either easier or harder, to whether or not you have that role filled.
Yeah, in Pandemic, how many roles are in that game? Because that's a game that I've been wanting to play, but then like living in a pandemic, it's like made it less wanting to do it. But like, how many roles are in Pandemic?
So if I recall, there are 6 roles.
Wow.
Each one has its own pros and cons. You have the ability to affect the game more if you're one role. The medic, for example, is one that is really effective at treating diseases. And what they do is, beginning game, they have to use one of your turn actions to treat diseases. But once you cure that disease, they just become like the Jesus of diseases as soon as they enter that town. All cured diseases are wiped from the board.
So these are more like some of these roles we're talking about are like characters in the game that enhance it. So are there any, because I haven't played Clue in such a long time and I know we've been talking about it a lot lately, but are in the game Clue, are there any special abilities for the different characters?
No.
Just flavor text.
Huh. All right, yeah. Well, what about in the game of Life? You know how you get the, if you're the police officer, if anyone rolls like a 10, you get.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there is that in Game of Life. There's the police officer. They have like probably the best thing with that.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you can do like, if you're the doctor and you land on one of the medical spots where it's like, oh, you need surgery. But if you're the doctor, you don't have to pay, because that makes sense in real life.
I think that's what medical school is. They're like, hey man, you don't have to pay any more medical bills. You pretty much
You're
live
set.
in Canada.
You are set for life.
All right, what other games have some distinct roles in them? Because this is a challenging topic.
So another game we talk about a lot, or at least I do because I love it so much, and I'm going to make you guys play it at some point, is Zombicide.
Nice.
Yes. So like I said, I never played the modern setting, but I think it pretty much follows the same as the fantasy. So there are people who can take damage, people who can deal a lot of damage, people who can move, people who can deal with the zombies better, and like spellcasters, range. Like there's a lot of different roles based on the character you pick. The newest Zombicide game that I actually just was part of a Kickstarter for, Dead and Alive, I think it's called. It's like a Western theme. It looks really cool, but the one thing is they seem to have simplified it down to just classes. So I believe it's going to be like a townsfolk who can do like unlimited number of item searches, a gunslinger who's good at guns, obviously, a brawler, and I think it's like holy or something like that. It's basically like a priest, and then the steampunk expansion adds engineers. But I will stick with what I know, which is Black Plague and Green Horde. And there are definitely some fun characters in there that you can get. Like, my favorite is Sir Schwartz, and he is a copyright-free version of the Black Knight from Monty Python.
Nice.
So every character has several sets of abilities. They have a blue, yellow, orange, and red, and you start off automatically with your blue, and as you like level up, you know, you kill more zombies, get more experience, you get more abilities. And Sir Schwartz's blue ability is called Is That All You've Got, which is every time you take damage, you can choose to discard an item in your pack and not take damage instead. So we've definitely gone through games where he has like really high armor, so it's like you have to roll like a 6 on the die to hurt him. And then also if he gets hurt, I had like a backpack full of stuff, so we were like, Sir Schwartz gets hit, hit when he wants to get hit.
Nice. Do you ever see that movie Jumanji when the guy has the backpack and he's like getting flung around and all
Yes.
the stuff? That's all I think is like someone keeps attacking him and then just a mace falls out and a gun falls out.
Yep.
Okay, so in this game, can you have, and this goes for Pandemic too, or can you have more than one person be the same class, or does everyone have to pick a different role? Like you can't have just like a bunch of the same people.
I don't know about Zombicide, but Pandemic, there is one role that each person can have. And in some of the later expansion packs, because Pandemic is a cooperative game where you're all trying to help each other fight the disease. In one of the expansions that I can't think of the name of off the top of my head, you actually get to become a bioterrorist, which means you are now working with the board, actively trying to make the other players lose. And that is a fun role to play because your win condition is that everyone else loses.
Oh man, that is a fun condition to play. It's like as long as I had fun, guys.
Sounds like a role for your wife.
Right? No, that's how we're playing 2-player Pandemic. She's just like, I'm gonna kill you. I was like, stop saying it. We haven't started.
Pandemic, you definitely need at least 3 to 4 people, though.
That's always more fun, anyways. Oh man, yeah. Joe's over here talking about how you get like 10 people for that one game. I don't know that many people that would come
Yeah.
over.
So Zombicide, Black Plague, and Green Horde, you basically have a character and like a card. I don't actually have any near me for once because I've actually cleaned my desk. But I mean, I guess if you have multiples of the same characters, you could technically all be the same character if you wanted. But there's no. So the base box comes with 6 characters, and then there's expansions, and then if you back Kickstarters and stuff, you get extra characters and stuff. So I have a character called Troy, who is just Ash Williams from Army of Darkness.
Nice.
And then I have Scowl and Grin, who are Joker and Batman.
Oh wow.
But then, like I said, Dead and Alive isn't out yet, but I'm very excited for it. It looks like based on what I can tell, I think they've simplified it so everybody has got the same abilities. And again, I think it's like the base box would come with 6 characters, and you usually have a team of 6. Like, because you can play Zombicide by yourself even.
Oh well.
It's either by yourself or cooperative, because like you draw cards to determine like which zombies get spawned, and there's rules based on how they move, and then you end up just, if there's like a certain point where it's like, well, they would do this or this, you could just be like, well, I'm in control of the board, I could just say they do this, which is more beneficial to me. But you try to play it fair to yourself, because obviously you're just cheating the game if you don't.
I bought this game just so I could win it. It's like buying GTA just to put in all the cheat codes. It's still fun.
Yeah, it is.
You can still spawn a tank and make it fly. I don't see anything wrong
Right.
with that.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, Zombicide, you can just easily have a whole team of just all brawlers and no spellcasters. I mean, everyone can use every weapon and every spell and everything like that you find, because what you do is like you go into a building and you can use a search action to draw from the item deck, and everybody can use everything for the most part. It's just there are people who are more proficient with such things. Like there's a character, the main wizard character in Black Plague has an ability called Spellbook, so it's like you don't actually have to have the spell card equipped, you can keep it in your backpack and still cast it.
So kind of like a wizard.
And then like Troy, because it's Bruce Campbell, Ash Williams, his ability is you don't have to reload guns or crossbows if you have them.
Surprised that's not like a Schwarzenegger character where you can just spray a machine gun just constantly.
I don't know. They definitely must have made a Schwarzenegger character at some point, because like I said, they have all of the first modern Zombicide edition, which has like 6 expansions each, and then they just like remade it into 2nd edition Zombicide. And then there's the whole Invader one where it's like on Mars zombies, but I didn't get either of those. I like the fantasy one.
You can play this with as little as one person, and I've been seeing so many new games like this that are one-person games, and I think it's incredible that you can do that, because then if you get good enough at it, just start, hey man, I need more people over here.
I mean, it all boils down to, if you need multiple people, chances are, like, you're going to have less opportunities to play this game. Another game that comes to mind is One Deck Dungeon, and it's basically a D&D dungeon crawl in a board game that can be anywhere from 1 to 4 players. And just, you can pick mage, you can pick ranger, rogue, paladin, all the stuff. And like Joe was saying, that certain characters are more efficient at certain skills, and any monster you have two. You can either do it with like might, which is strength and ability to swing a sword, or magic. And obviously, some monsters are harder to beat with magic versus might, and vice versa. But I mean, they have a lot of games that come out that, quite frankly, are quick to pick up, and you can even play with as little as just by yourself.
That game you were just talking about reminds me of a game we haven't played in a while, but it's a card-based like D&D style game. Where you get a
Munchkin?
Munchkin, that's right, yeah. And I love that game because you get to pick like a class and a race, and depending on what that is, like you get to equip different things. And I introduced that to my kids first, and that was like, oh man, now I'm like teaching them D&D stuff. You freaking nerds are just like born into this now.
There's one game I should bring up. I had to look up the name of it, but it's called Cosmocracy. It's a game I got and played with my friends. So what it is, it's basically an intergalactic debate game. So everybody gets a race that they represent. So there's like humans, there's robots, there's like a war race, there's a group of space
Vegans.
whales, and every like race you have has things that state like this is what your race wants. And I think there might be things that's like your race is against. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I played it. And then what you do is you draw like two cards, and it's like, should we legalize robot workers? Should we
Oh,
build war monuments? Things like that. And the two people go at each other, like they debate with each other, and then everybody else votes and you get points, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game gets to be like elected ruler of the galaxy. But that's a really fun game that me and my friends have played multiple times.
that would be fun. I would love a debate style game, especially when it's I don't know, multi-worldly, like a bunch of different races. That'd be so fun because like you said, there's whale people.
Yeah, I can't remember all of them, but there's some fun races or species and such. And then one of the other things I forgot that's really fun about it is what you say is true. So you could just make up facts,
Oh, nice.
and then whoever goes next has to like they can't deny those facts. Like if you say, "Oh, the whale people killed thousands of innocent souls just to like feed themselves or something like that." The whale people are like can go up and be like, "Yes, we did, but they were a bunch of like serialistic cannibals or something like that." Like you can add on to it, but
Yeah.
whatever one person says is true, and I think that was always a fun factor.
It's like an improv thing. You can only be like a yes and.
It is really fun. We've played it a few. My friends and I have played it a few times. I actually went up against one of my friends who went to college for like debating and like lawyers shit and stuff, and I still beat him.
Nice. That is a true DM right there. It's like, hey, I don't think so. I charisma roll really high right before this.
I mean, I have strong imposter syndrome as a DM, but people keep showing up to my game, so it means I must be doing something right.
Yeah, but you keep paying us.
Shh, shh.
You guys are getting paid?
Pay us in good
I
times,
can't
maybe.
cut that part out of the editing.
Yeah.
Then people really start questioning.
Yeah, it's like, how does Joe do this?
So did anybody think of any other roles, or do we want to move on to news?
I don't think I have any other roles. And even as we keep talking about these, they all seem pretty similar as far as like having a class or a race with a few different abilities and nothing too game changing. There might be some things in some games, but yeah, no, let's go on to some D&D news. What you got for us, Joe?
Well, it's not really D&D news because nothing really exciting has happened in the last 2 weeks.
I don't believe it.
I really thought because of like the pattern when we were first starting the Reborn Tabletop Team podcast, I thought we were going to get another series of Unearthed Arcanas drop every 2 weeks, and I'd be like, that's perfect. We could talk about that every 2 weeks. However, we didn't get an Unearthed Arcana in these last 2 weeks, so I thought, because I have a horrible Kickstarter addiction. I love backing things on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I actually found something that was really cool. It popped up in my recommended feeds. It's called Clash of Deck, and it's a real free-to-play card game. So these guys are making a physical card game, and all you're paying is the €2, which is about $2.35 for shipping, and that's it.
Where's the shipping from? It only costs $2.
I don't know, but that's all they're charging you. Like you're not paying for the game, you're just paying for shipping, which I think is like so crazy that someone on Kickstarter is doing essentially a free game.
That is interesting. It makes me wonder what's going to happen to make money off this thing.
They have a whole thing in the description. I think it's like something they've released before, but they're like making it better. Like before it was like, let's see. The game was published in 2020 in an atypical form. Cards you cut yourself from a folded sheet of cardboard, and a new standalone expansion was published each month. Today, thanks to the feedback and support of its community of players, Clash of Deck takes off with new edition available in English. The game will have more conventional components such as real cards, larger and better quality with a tuck box. It's just a deck of like 32 cards.
I mean, this could also just be a free marketing project for another project that they have coming down the line.
Yeah, because it could be the start of the set. Like,
This goal of the Kickstarter campaign is to introduce Clash of Deck to the whole world and to bring community together around the game. If the Kickstarter campaign succeeds, we will have the necessary dynamic to publish additional paid content on a regular basis to enrich the game.
wow.
There you go. It's free
Yeah, but at
marketing.
the same time, being able to get like the base game out there so that everyone has it is pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of like getting the phone into everyone's hand, and then you start, cranking out these apps. So if
Exactly.
you can if you can get the cards out there, maybe you just need those cards at first. Because I think Cards Against Humanity does something like this, where they have like the free first deck online. You can I don't know if you can just print it off or something.
Yeah, you can do that. And I will say that according to the number of days left as of recording, because we always have to date the podcast, it's 17 days to go. So by the time this podcast will come out, there'll probably be 3 or 4 days left. So as long as you listen to this like the day it comes out, you'll still be able to get this if it interests you. But that is Clash of Deck, a real free-to-play card game on Kickstarter. There's some free advertising for you.
If it's too late for you, I bought 15 of them, and they're going for $100 a piece. So you should have got it while it was hot.
But that's all I have for news, but I thought that was still an interesting thing to talk about as a free thing on Kickstarter. Let's move on to Dungeons and Dragons, where rolls are the core of the game. Ever since the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons, there have been classes to separate people. That's all I got.
I mean, it makes sense. You obviously want to have some level of variety so that it's not, oh, I am playing Hercules. Oh, that's weird. I'm also playing Hercules. Oh, that's weird. I'm also playing Hercules. Oh, that's fine. I'm playing Heracles. Dumb mythology joke.
Everybody gang up on that one.
Yeah, right? It's like, why are you a gnome? What do you think about, like, so there, we have all the different types of roles that we have in the party, but then even like the DM is like a major role for the game. So like without like a DM, what changes that? I've never played a DM. I think you both have been the DM in some fashion. So how does that role change versus any role you play as a player? Because I feel like those are very separate entities.
So DM is basically wild card role, where you are every and all roles at all times, and you're also simultaneously wanting to pull your hair out because you want your party to do one thing, and they're off in a completely different plane of existence, and you have no control over this.
What I was about to say is very similar. I was going to say, when you're a player, the only thing you know is what you're going to do. When you're a DM, you know everything except what's going to happen.
That's not bad. Yeah, that's one thing that I think of whenever we're playing is, okay, so these DMs, man, they're trying to have us do this kind of plan or this adventure or this dungeon, and the role you have to play is to, all right, little sheep, come here, here, do this thing. Does it feel like that sometimes, or am I way off base?
It really depends on the campaign. So the first one I did with you guys, I really railroaded you to the point where I got you guys on a train in between every session. But at the same time, it was because I was new to it, and pretty much everyone except Haley was new to it. So it was like, I really felt like having a structured thing was the best course of action, because it really helped us kind of... I always liked playing by Dishonored rules. If you've never played the game Dishonored, it's basically you have a set space in which you can do things, but you can pretty much do anything you want in that space. And it drastically, if you do certain things, it can drastically change how later on things go. I've now gotten better to a more open world thing. My Bar Walk campaign is very... So as I've described before, we're on season 2. Season 1 was pretty kind of like linear, where I was like, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. And I was like, here's a couple places you can go. You don't have to, but if you don't know what the consequences are going to be. And then season 2 was, here's your threat. You have one in-game year to figure out how to stop it. Go. And I obviously gave them certain like highlighted points they can do, and they've been doing that, but they have freedom to do what they want. And then we go into the America campaign where I'm like, here's your hunt. You have to go after this specific cryptid. And then in between that, I say you can do whatever you want. And then nobody tells me what they want to do until like we're playing already.
Nice. So do you feel your role changes when you have newer people or people that don't speak up about what they want to do? And how do you mitigate that?
So we'll take America for example. That's a perfect example. So Rowan, who's playing Elijah in our America campaign, so I asked him. So I asked everybody like a week in advance, what do you want to do this session? Because it's your free time. You have like 3 weeks of downtime in between your next hunt. And he didn't really get back to me. And that's fine. I understand we're adults. We have lives. He has to work and think. But he's like, I want to dismantle capitalism. And I'm like, how do you want to do that? And he's like, I don't know. And so eventually he's like, so there's this place called The Zone, which is
Definitely not Amazon.
definitely not Amazon, but there's this place called The Zone, which is like the main hub of like buying and shipping and everything across America.
Okay.
And he's like, I want to go to a zone shipping thing and destroy it. I'm like, okay, as much as I love that idea, and I started generating all these cool ideas, and I can't mention them because Mike is here, and I don't want to spoil it for him, and I don't know if Rowan listens.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
But I have some cool ideas on what to do.
Yeah, I can mute the headphones.
No. So I have some ideas, but I was like, listen, man, you told me this right now while we're in the session. I don't have time to make a map or anything. I'm going to have to save this for your next downtime. And he's like, I understand because I just came up with it myself. So luckily I have a player who understands the situation. I'm trying to think. I think the only person who's really ever thrown me off on putting me in the spot is our friend Mitch.
Mitch is good at with improv, though.
He is, but he definitely will throw some random shit at me. Back when we were playing and he was Alfred, like he definitely threw some wild curveballs at me on what he wanted to do.
As a new player, though, like I always would leave our sessions going, how much of that was planned? Because there's no way that everyone was talking about this before like I showed up, like because I think you rolled with it quite well, especially because I understood so much of what Mitch used to say because he would like always be quoting Jake and Amir stuff. So I was always like, oh wait, that's what he's talking about. I kind of get it. And then it'd be like a slow roll into you going, oh, we're talking a web video. Like I see where we're at.
Part of it's always just rolling with the punches and being able to come up with shit on the spot. And the other part of it is always having... See, a lot of people say you should have just a skeleton of your world and let your players fill it in. Based on my experience, I think you should have some... I know there's going to be a gross example, but having meat start growing on the bones.
Ew.
So you...
Sorry.
So if they say something, you can be like, well... I already have like a little seed planted. I already know kind of what's going on there, so we can expand that immediately right now. It's just how my brain works. I think I might be different than most people. I don't know. Because, I mean, like, you guys could ask me anything about any of my worlds right now, and if I don't have something, I will say something probably that will make it sound like I had it planned.
Well, I always feel like there might even be like a character that you guys are thinking about, and you're like, how do I introduce them? And then someone's like, hey, I want to talk to this old lady over here. It's like, bingo, that's how you guys are meeting her. And then it just happens, because otherwise, I don't believe that sometimes whenever I've played with you guys, I've been like, I want to do this goofy thing. And you're like, oh, all right. Yeah, they have just what you're looking for. I'm like, no way. What are the chances?
Joe has 100% has a dartboard of NPCs. Whenever Mitch says some ridiculous ass shit, he's just like, all right, okay, and class, all right, let's do this.
I was like, I'm looking for this very, very, very specific thing. Oh, don't mind if I don't pull it out of my Rolodex of NPCs. So, what do you think about switching gears a little bit? And because I haven't played enough campaigns where this kind of thing happens, but I've heard on other podcasts that do campaigns where they'll end up having like a leader role and like a companion role, and then those like supportive characters. Like, do you guys ever run into that kind of situation when you guys are playing? Because you guys have played significantly more than me.
I'm going to be honest. I hate being the leader and being in charge of things because I'm always constantly second guessing myself. Like, are we on the right path? Are we doing what we should be doing? So, like, I will never be like, oh, I'm the leader and I should be the person in charge. No, I'm the sassy. I will listen to what you say, but if you do something stupid, I'm gonna call you out on your shit kind of character.
Nice.
For example, in America, there is one healer. It is me, a celestial warlock.
Wait, that's the healer?
Yes.
We are the casting crew.
This is how you know we are in trouble. We have 4 casters. I, as a warlock, am the tankiest player with the most AC and the only access to healing, basically.
Wow.
And there is a sorcerer who likes to face check bushes. And 2 sessions ago, he got his ass kicked by a Bigfoot, and I told him, stop face checking bushes. I can only heal you so many times. And then he goes and tries to break into fucking not Amazon.
Not Amazon.
And gets caught, as one would expect. Comes on beat to shit. And I was like, all right, well, you can go sleep that off because I'm not helping you with that.
Can I ask you, was it a real Bigfoot or is there like another thing that it actually was?
It was real Bigfoot.
Oh man, I always wanted to meet him.
Yeah, they are hunting cryptids, and it's quite a fun adventure. But that's the thing, right? Is like I would say with like the casting crew, like I don't think there's like one leader. I mean, you all kind of like will go to Maynard when you need dad, and Nexibus can be the voice of reason, but I think like everybody has a pretty equal voice in the group still. And then meanwhile, in like my Barwalk campaign, I think like Henrik technically kind of leads the group more, but it's really, he's not really the leader either. It's, they work well together. There are players who are a little bit more quiet, and then there's people like Jeff's character Bernard, who is like trying to drink or sleep with anything he can find.
Bigfoot? Oh, different campaign. Sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about that.
But I think Mike had like the original question on the podcast was like, how do you choose between being a healer versus a fighter? How do you guys choose that? Because for me, I don't feel like if I picked any role, I would be so good at it that I'd be like, guys, don't worry, I got this. And they would just be like, hey, here's a good example. Flint. I was like, I'm gonna be a cleric, and everyone was like, oh man, great, we got a healer. I'm like, you guys want to be healed? What do you mean?
Well, and I think that comes with the stipulation of everyone looks as a cleric. You were there to heal people and nothing else. But if you look at the critical role, like there are 2 clerics in that party, and there's one cleric, Caduceus, who primarily heals, and then there's the other cleric, Jester, who does wizardy-like levels of damaging spells. So, I mean, even if there is a set role that you're playing, like you can twist it and fine tune it, and you're not just pigeonholed into like, I'm going to every turn heal someone.
Yeah.
There's almost always some level of flexibility. Me personally, I like playing magic casters. I understand the need for frontline fighters. I appreciate my frontline fighters. I hate being a frontline fighter, even though that was my original character concept, was a fighter. My very first, because it was something simple that I could understand. As soon as I started playing it, I'm like, this is painfully boring. I know what I'm going to do. If I roll low, it sucks. My turn's over. But as I kind of worked into spell casting and things like that, I genuinely like being able to use spells in creative ways. My go-to example of this is I was doing a one-shot with Joe, and he pulled out an Elder Brain on us that was encased in glass and had metal on it. And I, having built this character in about 5 minutes, randomly chose spells.
Excuse me, I should mention, this was not a one-shot. This was part of the Barwalk campaign, and you were invited as a guest because we were playing online.
That's right.
And it worked out because without you, probably everybody would have been dead.
So Joe sends
works
us
out
this
that way.
picture of the Elder Brain that is just a brain encased in glass with what looked
A
to
pirate
be
hat.
yes, what looked to be metal framework. And I saw that. I was like, oh, I picked heat metal. That's perfect. I was like, hey, DM, do I see metal anywhere on this? And he's like, ooh, I know where you're going with this. I know you're going heat metal. Yes, there's metal. No, it's not directly touching the brain. To which I immediately spun that around as, is there liquid inside of the glass? And he said yes. And
Oh.
basically, I got to use heat metal to boil an elder brain alive.
Did it work?
It did
Yeah.
work.
Holy cow. Oh man, I'm sorry, Joe.
I don't know. I play so little that I kind of just don't worry about roles. Like sometimes I'll try to fill it, but it kind of just depends on the character I want to play. So like the one character I really want to play more of is Bog. He's a Furbolg wild soul barbarian, and I built him to be tanky. Like his number one stat is Constitution, and then his second is actually Dex instead of his Strength, because I want him to have that high AC plus that high health. And then and then I think I did Strength for damage, but obviously it wasn't super important because he's like more of a protector than a fighter. But that's just like a personal thing. I have other characters I've like built out as fun. Like there's a character I made that's a paladin monk with a couple levels of fighter, because hypothetically speaking, if you can use, because sometimes the DM can rule against this because of stupid rule laws, but if you're allowed to use smites on your fist punching, what you could potentially do, and one is using a specific subclass of paladin, you can give yourself advantage on every single attack against a target. You can then use your 2 attacks, action surge to do 2 more attacks, and then flurry of blows to do 2 more attacks. That's 6 attacks in 1 round with advantage, and choosing to dump in the smites whenever you crit. On top of that, if you have 3 levels of fighter, you can lower that percentage chance to 19%. So you have a 10% chance instead of a 5% chance of critting. And
Wow.
you could do some pretty serious damage with that character.
See, that's the kind of stuff that I need to like learn so that I come to the table. I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna be rolling for like 5 minutes on my turn, guys. Don't mind me. He's gonna be dead.
Well, listen, here's the thing is, last I checked, Julian, you're a father with a wife and like a life. Me, I'm a guy who goes out to like a place to clean at night for 5 to 6 hours a night by myself. So I have a lot of spare time in here.
I took that in a domestic violence joke. Like, hey man, you got plenty of time to practice these punches. You're married. I was like, Joe, where are you heading with this?
I just meant to say I am a loser with no life who has time to think about Dungeons and Dragons builds.
Lucky, you're a hero in my eyes.
You have to be careful when thinking about D&D at work, because sometimes character accents will come out in the middle of work.
So I always feel like another role that I like to fill when I'm playing is like the comic relief. And I do need to get better at this because there will be times where people want to have like a very serious campaign going or a serious one shot or something. And I'm over here just making dick and fart jokes just because I'm like, hey man, I had like 3 beers right before we played this. So like, I'm having a good time.
I think it depends on who you're playing with and like things you can establish. I don't normally like if I'm playing like when we did the one shot where it was like in the city and you guys could summon spirit warriors. If you guys remember that, that was like, I knew who I was dealing with. I was like, there's a slight serious story here, but I know who I'm dealing with. I'm not gonna like force you guys to not be who you aren't. Like when going back to Mitch, he was like fighting a thief who was like stealing stuff from people and then gives it back or something stupid like that.
He steals it back, makes it better, gives it back to them, and they're like, "Wait, I guess this is better, but I didn't like that you took it in the first place."
Listen, everyone's got that meme character, but sometimes you have to build a little bit of depth into the meme character, because like if you're playing a long-term campaign, it's going to get old quick. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not appreciated, because a lot of times, in some of the more serious campaigns, you will touch on sensitive subjects that both the characters and the players behind it are going to have a hard time processing. So, it is nice to have that quick turnaround joke. Is like, oh man, that was really heavy. Well, here's Flint doing something stupid, or here's
Right.
Well, I mean, if you remember back when we were doing Mike's 3-part one shot, if I
Yes.
remember correctly. I was ended up playing two characters, but we don't have to talk about that. I was playing Iron Blood, and you were playing
Oh
my
yeah,
sidekick Iker.
yeah, Icker.
Well, I think your real name was like Ecor or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
But
can't
he's
remember which one it was because like we went back and
no,
forth a
because
lot, a lot.
your real name was Ecor, but because you were Iron Blood's sidekick, you let him call you Iker
Yeah, but no one
because
else. Yeah.
yeah, nobody else was allowed to do that. But you were like a good sidekick character there who's like, yeah, Iron Blood, go get him. I don't know what he's doing, but
I do feel like I fall right into the sidekick role a lot better with D&D, and I'll tell you why I think this is true, because I don't know a lot about D&D, so I can like really like lean heavy on like whatever the person that probably knows a little bit more about it than me is doing. I'm like, right, let's do this. It's like I'm clambering along in heavy armor while we're trying to sneak attack something.
yep.
I mean, realistically speaking, the person who sounds like they know what they're doing the most is just the person with the highest charisma score, and they're just bullshitting their way through.
Yeah, no, that is something that I feel like always sucks about D&D. Like if you do have high charisma or maybe low charisma in real life, but you're sitting there rolling the opposite of whatever your, IRL stats are, you're like, I should have been able to talk my way out of this. Not today, dude. You rolled a 3.
You never know, right?
Or if you're someone with the attention span of a wet napkin and you're playing a wizard who seems to have their shit together all the time, and you're like, I have no fucking idea what how
You're
do
a
I play an
barbarian,
intelligent?
but you're like really calm.
How do I play an intelligent character? Or you're a barbarian and you have children sleeping in the same household and you're trying to be quiet.
Yeah.
I would like to rage.
Yeah, right.
Like to rage, please.
Prepare for the rage. That's always one thing I try to I try to play a drunk character so I can get really into character. That I'll just be like chugging away the entire night.
So we know what you've been doing with quarantine.
Yeah, man, I had to switch to this soda water just so I could have something, some actual water in my system. I guess beer's got water in it, right?
Speaking of roles, one thing I wanted to say back when we first began the topic in D&D, but I fully forgot until now, was did you guys know that in the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax made the Ranger the most powerful class because he absolutely was in love with Aragon from Lord of the
Oh,
Rings?
I believe that.
I have friends who played AD&D who are like, yeah, Ranger, that's the class to be. It's like, not anymore. No, Rangers can be used effectively. It's Rangers is one of those classes that is heavily reliant on the setting of the campaign with some of the abilities that they have access to, and if you chose forest and your entire campaign's in the mountains, well, sucks to be you.
I haven't read the revised version and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything because I didn't like it, like the little bits I did read. But they do have the Unearthed Arcana, which is campaign legal now, or has been for a while, which definitely improves the whole. You don't have a favored terrain anymore. You now have, I think it's like called Natural Explorer. So like as long as if you're like traveling anywhere for over an hour, you have like double movement speed and you can't be tracked magically and stuff. They definitely fixed it.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
And I say that because going back to our good friend Jason, who's been on this podcast before, he plays Henrik the Ranger, who is Mr. Crazy Stupid Damage in our group now.
Oh, nice.
He is a Horizon Walker. So one of their like base abilities is you can freely choose a target and they take an extra, at his level now, 2d8 force damage. And like nothing is resistant to force damage, which is really good. On top of that, he can also add a Hunter's Mark, which is another d6. His bow is already a d10. I gave him some blazing bow strings so he can like ignite them, and he does an extra d10 of fire damage. And then on top of that, he can also do sharpshooter. So when that hits, that's another 10 damage. And I'm trying to convince him, just because I'm loving the amount of damage, I'm trying to convince him to take a couple levels in rogue so he can get that assassin thing and just crit when he wants. He'll do a round where he does like, I think he did like 78 damage in one round. And the thing too is Horizon Walkers are really cool because at a certain level, they get an ability where as long as you're attacking 3 different targets, you can attack 3 times, and you can also teleport freely up to 10 feet before every attack. So he's like bouncing around the map, doing crazy buttloads of damage to different things. He's got all these fun spells. Like a ranger can definitely be a good build if you know what you're doing. I think the biggest problem, in my opinion, with the ranger comes from the fact that it is the only class that comes with a built-in pet that people want, and the pet class is terrible.
Yeah, and I think they've released I think it is Pact of the Tome Warlock now gets access to a pet as well. Or there's some Warlock that gets a pet as well.
I'll have to look it up, but like I'm saying, like that's one of the biggest complaints with Ranger is when they added the Beast Conclave or whatever it originally was. It's like you have like your special ability is you get a dog or you get a bear, and in the player's handbook it doesn't scale well at all. Like your animal doesn't get magical attacks, they don't get any increase to damage. In the Unearthed Arcana, they fixed it where you add like your proficiency bonus to it. You can like their attacks become magical at a certain point, but it definitely was like one of those things where it's like you get this pet which everybody wants, and then it's like, oh, it doesn't do like anything, or it just died because it's a dog
Just
in a
underwhelming
combat zone.
all over the place.
It sounds like
Yeah.
they tried to make a flavor pet a workable gimmick in that.
Yeah.
What's the role of the pet supposed to be? Is it just a familiar that you can have? But it sounds like you don't get it right away.
I don't have the rules in front of me. I could pull them up if I really wanted to, but I'm going to try not to. I'm going to resist that urge.
So I think you actually get the pet at a pretty low level. It might not be right away, but it's definitely one of those things that like it's like when you're doing combat and you have an NPC that you have to keep alive throughout the combat. Like at a certain point, they're just becoming a liability for damage output to party survivability. Like, yeah, most characters can usually survive combat encounters that the DMs make, unless they're trying to be a total dickhead. But
Notes taken.
NPCs have terrible levels of health. You know, any 10th level, like any attack from a 10th level character or higher is just basically an instant death. There's no real saving from it. So now you're like, okay, now I have to spend resources that take time and effort to get in. It becomes a thing where the pet / the NPC is just more of a combat hazard that you have to worry about.
Even a bear? Because I heard you say bear. That sounds dangerous.
Well, that's the thing is in Critical Role Season 1, Laura Bailey's character, Vexalia, had a bear called Trinket. And like early on, it was okay in the game. Like because I believe the series started off and they were like level 10 or something. And it was okay because it was a bear. But like eventually, like it got to the point where Trinket was going down every single fight and they were worrying about it dying. So Matt basically gave her like the equivalent of a Pokeball. So every time he like passed out, he went into the necklace and was fine. But it's like it just becomes like weight. Like it sounds fun to at level 3, if you're like, I have a bear, that's awesome. Like, druids, I don't even think a druid can turn into a bear at level 3. Like I could be wrong. I don't know what its challenge rating is. But like a bear is pretty good. But then it just becomes a point where it's like, I have a bear versus a dragon. This ain't gonna work very well.
I gotta say though, I was almost about to say, yeah, man, these animals sound stupid. And then you said Pokeball, and I'm back on, man. If I could just throw that thing out whenever I want and like retrieve it, I'm in, man. We're right in the middle of a town square, and I'm like, yeah, go Pikachu, and my bear pops out. They're like, why do you call it that? I don't know.
You get a lightning bolt like spray painted on it.
I have my wizard friend cast lightning bolt.
That's when you get Prime Familiar, and you can just have a Fey pet that can't die. Or if it does die, wait a couple hours, summon it again.
All right. I like this.
So, did you guys have anything you want to plug before we wrap up?
I still don't.
Just a reminder, I am streaming me being awful at Skyrim on Twitch, Mboron0219. Yeah, I died a lot of times. And then people tried to offer suggestions, and then it turns out that suggestion had been patched.
Oh, no.
And by people, he means me when I'm at work.
100%. It was a joke.
So you can come watch Mike be bad at Skyrim and watch me yell at him in the comments.
Hey, man, if you don't mind bad advice, I'll always be around.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, that's what I did originally in Skyrim. Like, are you playing the special edition?
Yes.
Okay, so that might be it, because that was an exploit I used in like the classic version.
Listen, I might have. I hate doing it, but I might have to go down the vampire path. It might be the only way I survive as a mage at low levels because it's rough.
And you're playing on a calculator, right? Like,
I mean,
you
with my
modded it.
internet, with my Wi-Fi capabilities, yeah, it's about the level of computing power of a calculator.
5 FPS.
Listen, if you want to see someone spaz out at giant spiders and call them sacks of eggs,
And have a guy pop into the chat and be like, "That's not a spell, Mike. That's a
Yeah.
bow."
I have my own rules lawyer in chat who's yelling at me,
Nice.
and for some reason I'm friends with him.
He still showed up for the podcast this week, so that's a good sign. So you can email any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, because dear Lord, we need them. We struggled to come up with one for this week at the tabletop team podcast at gmail.com. You can tweet anything you want at me, which is at DM Joe Thunder. And the tabletop team also streams about every other week. Not consistent, but about. We stream our Murica campaign. I am currently working on taking the archive footage, and I'm going to put it up on the internet. But due to Mike's amazing internet, it comes in like 3 or 4 chunks, so I need to figure out which one goes where, and probably should be some kind of like
It's that Ohio internet.
information, like put like a. I think I need to put like a 30-second like overall series recap at the front, and I'm just so lazy. I'm just so procrastinatingly lazy.
Listen, I bought a 50-foot Ethernet cord during session last time, and by last time,
50 foot doesn't make it to New York, though.
What I don't tell you, Julian, is that I do have a warp gate underneath my house.
Well, that's not fair.
No. So it'll hopefully, by next session, no longer be broadcast on Wi-Fi, which will hopefully solve the issue. I guarantee nothing, because it's Spectrum, but I'm going to try.
Well, that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mike and Julian, for showing up for another episode. And welcome to the tabletop team. Set my Discord to do not disturb. Put my phone on mute.
Me too. I thought that was a subtle jab at me.
No, that's more me, because here's the thing is, I have this weird sinking suspicion that my mom might just call me randomly. She likes to do that when she goes away on trips.
Oh. Joe, I need your
Yeah.
help.
My mom tried to text me, or didn't try to text me in the middle of D&D last night, and she's like, "I want to talk. Are you free now?" And I was like, "Yeah, tomorrow's good."
I was like, I'm free if you're a wizard druid.
That's what that party needs, is another caster.
I am genuinely surprised there hasn't been player death yet.
No, I've been wanting to play a paladin lately. I haven't looked into it at all, but I've been like hearing things about it. And I'm like, oh man, that sounds like a fun one, because you got a little bit of casting abilities, but mostly it's melee, right?
Yeah, it's basically a fighter who's got some cleric abilities, or a
Oh
cleric
goddamn!
who's
You see how
focused
I
more on punching
fucking
shit.
pigeonhole myself into this fucking role all the goddamn time? My name is Flart.
Listen,
All right, Julian, you are actually spiking if you're going to be talking like that, so maybe turn your gain down a bit back.
All right,
So,
here we are.
good.
How are we doing?
That's good.
Okay.
Good sample. This is honestly not bad. I mean, we're learning.
Yeah.
I guess it's always easy to turn things up and turn them down. It's just I want to try to get it right the first time.
Yeah, if this microphone's always at the same settings, and I'm always talking about the same distance, then we don't have to
Yep.
do this every single time. We can jump right in.
Hopefully. Okay. You know what? I'm not even going to stop and restart this, because that's too much effort for me. I'm just going
this is all going to make it into the pre-podcast.
I mean, there's a whole fucking like thing you can pay for on this website that just fully like edits your podcast for you.
Wait,
So
no
technically,
shit?
all of this would be on if I just kept that.
The first 30 minutes
That's
that's
funny.
just bullshitting.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Hey,
so, what?
I was just gonna say that's the mark of a successful podcast if you can just bullshit for the first half of it.
All right. In 3, 2, 1.